Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. My name is Lewis Harris, and you are at Record in Progress, the podcast that I created in the wake of the 2024 presidential election because I felt, one, I was surprised at the results, and two, I felt like I could have done more to have the election go in the way I wanted it to go. And so I created this podcast with the purpose of sharing different perspectives, stories, and narratives to create understanding and a pathway towards a unified society that's better for all of us. And so I am privileged to have my next guest today, who is a college friend and somebody who is doing the work for those who need it most in her community. And so, would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Taylore. I'm from Vancouver, Washington. Lewis and I met, was it 2010,
Yep.
2011?
Yep.
Yeah, in college.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was the Commons Apartments. I will tell you that much.
A common apartment. Yeah. Good time.
Yes, very good times.
Mm-hmm.
Long time ago, but a place that, like most folks who go to college where lifelong friendships are established. It's good to see you again, Talori. And you already said where you live. How do you identify yourself?
She, her, or they is fine as well.
Okay. And I want to reiterate that question because a lot of people on the podcast so far, liberal and progressive folks, but we think that we have to identify our pronouns as how we identify. But like, I take a broader perspective. Like, I'm a spirit first and foremost, and then I'm
Mhm.
a Black gay man, and then I'm cisgendered, and I go by he him pronoun. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
I mean, I don't want you to fit into a box when you're so much bigger than a box. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's a big question. How do you identify yourself? I'm a person, a mother, a teacher, a friend, advocate.
Excellent. Yeah,
Um,
no, that's great. Yeah. I mean, mother, teacher, those are extremely important. I want to say voting blocks and I'm not sure, but I don't want to just reduce people to voting blocks, but I do respect our mothers and our teachers. Thank you for being on. You said you're a teacher. So the next question is, what do you do?
I am a high school social studies teacher. So I teach 10th through 12th grade. I have a world history class, a US history class, and then a civic/government class. I also we had a big budget cut last year, so I'm part time there and then also part time in this program called Open Doors, where
Okay.
we specifically work with 16 to 21-year-olds on it's on an alternative learning program to where they can come in and I meet with a cohort once a week to work with them on projects to help them receive competencies that are equivalent to like high school credits so they can still get their high school diploma. As well as I am our union representative for the high school that I work at and a big advocate for our teachers and staff.
Excellent. So you have very poignant perspectives as a union shop steward, which thank you for that work. And then as a teacher, but specifically a civics and history teacher, right?
Mhm.
I have some questions about that, and I'll probably just ask one of them. Do you
Okay.
feel like the education is teaching students the civic knowledge that they need to be successful adults?
Historically, no. Growing up, especially seeing male history teachers, and it's
Yeah.
normally been a stereotype of also the football coach. Let's just watch a bunch of World War II documentaries. See, you're laughing because yeah, that's exactly when you think
I
about it.
know that
Yeah,
person. I
no,
know that person.
yeah. And also, I was told at college because I was a pre-nursing major before, and
Okay.
then I was thinking about, oh, I actually think I want to teach high school, and what's something I'd be passionate about? History, right? So I went to an advisor at the college that we went to and
Yeah.
asked about that path. And I was teetering between that or like a preschool teacher. And I was specifically told, because I will never forget this, that it's really hard for females to break into that specific career choice, especially at the high school level. So maybe we should just help support you in being a preschool teacher. So there's that. And
What is
then
that?
just like thinking about what I learned in school versus what I'm teaching now and like the direction that I want to take in educating my students about government and civics and how important it is to learn about how your government works.
Yeah.
Because in order to make decisions, like you need to know how it functions, especially in a place that you're living, right? That has really navigated like the type of work I'm doing. And I, luckily, at the school that I'm at, have the freedom to be able to be more fluid and open into what I bring into the classroom and the types of lessons I teach. I do try to keep it as non-partisan as possible, right? I don't want to influence my students' decisions, but I do want them to be knowledgeable and learn how things work so that they can learn how to learn and learn
Yeah.
new skills so that that's a lifelong thing that then they can take that with them after they leave me and make better informed decisions.
Yeah, you heard my sigh there because I that's what I pray for our students is teachers who are equipping them with what they need to be successful adults.
Yeah.
That sounds cliche, but you know how this system of education has been. Like
Mm.
there's teachers who just read from a book and just do the bare minimum, and then there's teachers who are creative with their teachings and their lessons and stuff. And that's why I always one salute and thank teachers for their service because I mean you all are the front line of the next generation's capacity and
Right.
capabilities. When we're
Yeah.
not teaching our students critical thinking skills or you said it perfectly, how to make decisions or how to think, right?
Yeah. Learn how to learn.
Yes, how to learn.
Mhm.
That is so important because yeah, I know me growing up in the school system that I grew up in, I didn't believe it was okay to ask questions. And that is foundational to learning. And that actually affected my upbringing through the public education system. And it wasn't until I went to college that I like was like, oh man, like I was approaching this thing completely wrong.
And unfortunately, there are still teachers who are teaching from the book and not doing the thing,
I know.
which is really unfortunate. And I am also lucky enough to work at a project-based learning school, which
Okay.
also opens that up more for kids to take their own interests and creativity and navigate their learning more.
Right. Man, we can get into that because part of the reason I created this podcast is so that we can understand differences and create a pathway forward for everyone. And education is so incredibly important. It'll be interesting to see where the education system goes under the new administration.
Mm.
Ish. The next question is what is a credential that you use most often to sell yourself on job applications?
So I always use two phrases specifically. I'm adaptive, which also being as a teacher, I feel like that's really important is to be adaptive and flexible. And then I'm collaborative.
Excellent.
So I always talk about not just collaborative with teachers and like I'm collaborative with the students. I'm collaborative with the admin. I'm collaborative with the school district, with the parents, like all education stakeholders. We gotta work together, which I feel is
Yeah.
really important too.
Man, I want to unpack education so bad, but let's stick on to the questions because education is again extremely important. So the first question for our slate of questions is how did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
So I voted Kamala as president. I voted on local elections, mostly Democratic, except for three specific positions: treasurer, auditor, and the insurance rep counselor. And I voted Republicans for those positions just because historically, Republicans tend to own businesses and
Sure.
do better with money, financial things.
Sure.
They tend to be more owners in the military, as well as the demographics show that they tend to also be in the upper middle income range.
Sure.
So when thinking about it in terms of like money, that's why I voted Republican in that direction. And then in terms of things like land commissioner, I voted Democrat, because they tend to be like Democrats, demographics are more women tend to vote Democrat, more college graduates, and then also people under 30 tend to vote Democrat as well. And so I wanted things, national parks to be preserved, right? And then things like that. So that's why I voted that way. And then also, I think that in order to move forward and be progressive as a country, we need a mix of both. And the more that we have that mix, the more balanced it is. I feel like that's how we come together as a collective and share and be open minded and move forward and progress.
Yeah. Thank you for that perspective. It's so funny because before I got into politics, which I'm a systems person, we went to the same college. I got my degree in psychology and sociology. And so I'm always looking at systems and people and how we work. And
Hmm.
like you, before I got into politics, I was like, yeah, there's Democrats are good at a certain set of issues. Republicans are good at a certain set of issues. And I believe that we should be listening to both of those and incorporating both of those to
Right.
create policies that are both socially liberal, but fiscally conservative in ways. And it's good to hear somebody who also has that perspective, which one of the things which we might get into in this conversation is some people believe in the pendulum of politics. It always goes from one way to another. And some people also vote in that way. So somebody might vote Democrat one year and then Republican another year just to keep that pendulum swinging, if you will.
Right.
Any thoughts on that? Curious.
My thoughts are we were never supposed to have a two-party system in the first place.
Say that,
Those are my initial thoughts.
first of all. Say that.
So that is what, in terms of George Washington said it himself in his concession speech, right? Do not have a two-party system. It will
Wow.
ruin this country. And what do we have now? We have a two-party system. So it really, I feel like, divides people and makes them feel like they have to choose one way or the other. And really, it should be about, do you align with this person's policies and values? Do you actually agree with what they are saying versus I'm going to pendulum this year and then in 4 years, no, I'm not actually going to do it. That's not an informed decision. That's not actually critically thinking. That's not aligning your beliefs and values and morals and thoughts with this person in the things that they're going to do or say they're going to
Mhm.
do. And also, don't just go off what they say they're going to do. Actually look into what they have actually done. Saying one thing and doing another is really also important to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
And I honestly, I want to get away from this two-party system because it's garbage.
Yeah, no, I noticed before when I said before I got into politics. After I got into politics, I I realized as somebody who, is in the political system working to get to a level of office or influence, whatever, like the two-party system is the only way you can actually navigate that space successfully. There are some people who are good at working across the aisle or being independent and still being able to get into the halls of decision making and whatnot. But as somebody who was breaking into that space, I had to choose and I had to choose very early on. And if I chose one way, the other way would not support me. And you're right. We are in this
That's
system.
unfortunate. You shouldn't have to make that choice, right? You should be able to be more fluid in the policies that you align with. And so having to choose one side, I feel like really narrows the box.
Yeah. Yeah. And it always, depending on how far you go with that binary system, it prevents you from doing what might be right. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
if I'm a part of this system that says I have to be a Democrat, and if I step outside of that, then I'm no longer get support a Democrat. But if there's a policy that should be approached more conservatively, especially on the local level, then what kind of position does that put me in? And what kind of position does that put my constituents in if I'm just
Mhm.
voting one way? And so I've been lucky to be a bridge between those two perspectives on the local level. But, when it gets to national and state level, I'm like Democrat all the way. But that's the whole talk. That's the whole talk. Thank you for your
Yeah,
educational perspective on that. It's great.
you're welcome.
So the next question I have for you is what are three feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election?
So when the results were coming out, I was in shock and disbelief. I think I'm still in disbelief. So now I'm like, am I a conspiracy theorist? I don't know. Or not to be like,
I'm right there with you.
and then also just really worried.
Yeah.
So those are, I mean, shock, disbelief, and worried would be like the three main
Okay. Okay. Great.
feelings.
So what do you fear most about the next Trump presidency?
I fear history repeating itself in more ways than one. I fear the unknown and the known of what Trump has actually said he's going to do.
Right.
For example, being a dictator in the first day, he has said that in an interview that is on record. That's not edited or made up. Like mass deportation. Like I work in a school where it's a Title I school where I have a big minority group of immigrant families,
Mm.
of LGBTQ community, of neurodivergent community. And I feel like that's the demographic that's going to be like demographics that are going to be affected the most.
Yeah.
And it makes me really worried and fearful for the future for those communities and my students. I'm worried about history repeating itself because if you look historically at World War II and how who shall not be named came into power, it happened right after World War II, where Germany had to pay war reparation through the Treaty of Versailles, right? And they owed $33 billion at the time in 1933, right?
Right.
That
Right.
put Germany in such an economic despair. And then it also produced like runaway inflation, which
Mm.
we've seen in our own country. And we've
Yeah.
had war for how many years, right? And
Right.
then you have this person who comes into power. And what are they promising? They're promising economic prosperity. Whether that's true or not, they're simply stating, I can give you all these things and I can make you happy once again. So that makes me really worried because those are the exact same promises that were used. And this person has been known on interviews to bully and harass and target specific communities. And that makes me really worried. I'm worried about body autonomy. I'm worried about women's rights. I mean, with Trump being president, Roe versus Wade is not going to be overturned, which means that there's no federal protection over abortion rights. And which means that there are going to be, like, if you look at it statistically, 60 women a day are going to be essayed and look to turn
Oh, sexually
assaulted.
assaulted.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
In 60 women a day. So that means that those 60 women a day in our country are not going to be protected federally. That
Right.
makes me very fearful. The LGBTQ plus community. I mean, I have a partner who is a bisexual. And so that makes me worried, especially with the kids that I work. The day after the election, like my students, I made it an inquiry-based class because I know a lot of us were just like wondering a lot of things. I ran the class as let me put on the board the questions you have. What are these questions? And I ran my whole class like that. And a big question is, why does someone get to say what I get to do with my body? Why does someone get to decide who I am as a person and how I choose to be? I have a lot of transgender students. A lot of persons said, I wonder how many suicide rates are going to increase for the LGBTQ community because they are so worried about what's going to happen to them. I'm worried about minorities and mass deportation. He has no plan. Like, how are you going to determine who these criminals are and who they're not?
Right.
It's just based on stereotypes and looks at this point. And are you just going to have people just start pulling people over and being like, you don't look like the box that we're hoping for, so you're out of here. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about inflation. Like, Trump has 83% of his tax cuts are going to those people who are making over $500,000 a year. Like, Kamala's plan would have been way better for the middle and lower class. And in terms of like tariffs and how that works,
Yeah.
there are so many people who don't know how tariffs work.
Yeah.
That makes me really worried because that contributes to inflation. And Trump's plan inflates and increases the amount of money that we as Americans have to pay for things that are being exported and imported from other countries. And he
Right.
doesn't actually know how tariffs work.
Right.
So that also makes me really worried. So I'm fearful of a lot of things.
Yeah, and I want to unpack a couple of things that you mentioned. First,
Okay.
the tariffs, because I am trying to look at both sides. And I think one of the arguments that the right side says about tariffs is that it just would make it more expensive to get goods from outside of the country.
But
Like
that's
not,
not how tariffs work.
but the point is, or at least the hope is that that would spur those same productions domestically here in the United States. But the reality is, one, do the U.S. have the capacity to build the TVs and the electronics that China does? And two, is that really going to make things cheaper, given that we Americans have a pretty high standard of living, right? And so, like to pay even minimum wage to somebody, federal minimum wage, which is $7 compared to our like 15 or 16 here in Washington, like one, they're not going to be able to live. And two, isn't that going to reduce the price? I don't think so.
And you can actually look at that. If you look during Trump's first presidency and you
Yeah.
look at washer and dryers,
Okay.
for example,
Yeah.
he put a tariff on washer and dryers during his first presidency, right? There was production plants in America that was making them. And yes, it was more expensive to export them or
Uh-huh.
import them from other countries. But then domestically, we also had to raise the price of washer and dryers because it was making a more competitive market in terms of pricing. So we,
Right.
as a country, had to raise our prices for these products, which is
Right.
how tariffs work. So if you were to say put a tariff on, let's say, corn in our country, and we export and import corn and it's included in tons of our food products, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. If you say, like, I'm going to give a 60% tariff on China for corn, right? Okay. That sounds great. Yeah. Let's charge more money for corn for other countries, right? But if that happens, it actually increases the cost that it takes an American farmer to ship that out because it becomes a competitive market and China then has to raise their prices. So then we raise our prices because it has to be
Right.
a competitive market. Then it actually costs more money for that farmer to produce that item and
Right.
to ship it out and doesn't actually create more jobs.
And just to get a little bit more into detail there, when you say competitive market, part of what you're saying is that if they have to raise their price for the corn because it costs more to import it from us, right?
Mhm.
That the corn is set at a certain level, which means that people are willing to pay that. And so the domestic corn, which might not cost as much to import and export because it's here and it goes directly to stores, people see that, or at least the producers see that, I can actually charge it at this price because people are willing to pay for it at this price. So why don't I just raise it? And
Right.
so that's where you get like
And
market setting.
if you're doing it domestically, America tends to pay more in terms of like worldwide for workers and to
Sure.
have people do a job. So if you're not exporting it somewhere else where it's cheaper, like that work, and you're trying to
It's
hire
like,
local people to do that thing, it's going to cost you more money
right.
to have someone help you on your farm produce and sell corn and harvest it. You're gonna have to
Exactly.
raise your prices, right? So that you're able to support and pay your workers. So either you're gonna have to raise it anyways, which doesn't actually save you money.
Right. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I've been seeing like, people are gonna have a buyer's remorse here real soon, and yeah, that technically should be one of them. So awesome. Okay, so the next question I have is, what do you hope most about the next Trump presidency?
So I hope most that because I live in a blue state, I'm more protected for these things that I've been talking about. and it's like we can distance ourselves like we did the last time a little bit. It's really sad for the rest of the people that don't have that thing, and I know that's probably a really selfish mindset. Okay, okay.
Awesome.
I also hope that people learn from their mistakes.
Sure.
I hope that people actually take the time to research and learn how to learn so that they can become more educated on issues and policies and candidates and become more informed in their decisions moving forward.
Yeah,
That's what I hope.
totally.